Before the Abbasids, there were the Umayyads. The Umayyads were another very large dynasty in Islam. Under the Umayyads, the Caliphate grew very rapidly in size. The empire greatly expanded, stretching over 5.17 million square miles at its extent. This makes it one of the largest empires ever to exist in history. This is the main product of the Umayyads. They were able to build this empire to the biggest it could be. However, while the Umayyads did expand on a lot, there were still problems in their rule. A big problem with the Umayyads is that they did not focus on religion enough. In the Islamic Empire, religion is everything, and the Umayyads were in it for the political power and especially the money. They did not care what happened in the religious world. This caused a lot of unrest in the empire, and one large group that was especially unsettled by this were the Abbasids. The unrest grew even more as the Umayyads were not treating non-Muslims the same as Muslims, this being in direct contradiction with Islamic law. As the unrest grew greater and greater, the Abbasids began to get more and more support. So eventually, the Abbasids decided enough was enough, and by accusing the Umayyads of ruling the Islam as emperors rather than deputies of the Prophet of Islam, the Abbasids claimed religious legitimacy for their revolt and started this revolt. The revolt was led by al-Safa, who would become the first caliph for the Abbasids. He took his rebel army and went to Damascus. They were able to wipe out the Umayyads and easily take power. There were many small battles, but for the most part, the Abbasids destroyed the Umayyads. The Abbasid Caliphate officially began in 750, once the final Umayyad Caliph was defeated in February 750 in a battle on the Zab River. As the empire began, everything seemed to be going perfectly. The capital of Islam moved from Damascus to Baghdad, and this allowed for learning to flourish. For the first 2 to 3 centuries of Abbasid rule, Islam was in a golden age. This golden age was an age of learning, where knowledge and invention spread through Islam and the empire. However, the golden age could only last for so long. After those 2 to 3 centuries of invention and learning, the learning began to die down. A lot less was being shared and a lot less was being invented. This was the start of the fall of the Abbasids. The Abbasid Empire reached its greatest peak during the Islamic Golden Age, and now that it was over, the empire began to slowly decline. Over the next 2 centuries of their rule, the Abbasids were on a slow road to collapse, and this was because of a few reasons. First, during the centuries after the Golden Age, the caliphs began to get complacent. They were very fond of the easy living that came in the Golden Age, and the riches that came along with it, and they really did not want to give that up. Many of the caliphs did not want to rule very much at all. These caliphs being complacent led to the idea that instead of a caliph being an all-powerful politic and religious powerhouse, the caliphs were simply just symbols of the Abbasids' empire decline. They were just religious figureheads. However, as the caliphate went on, someone had to stop this complacentness, and that is what al-Mamun and his brother and successor al-Mu'tasim did. They created an army loyal to the caliphate, which prevented the further disintegration of their empire. But in doing so, they created a divide between the caliphate and the people that it was ruling. Another reason as to why the Abbasid Empire declined is that in the 10th century, Seljuk Turks invaded and took over Baghdad. This began Abbasid Seljuk rule. and this led to the people of the empire to not respect caliphs even more. This gap between the caliphs and the people kept growing bigger and bigger. Around the empire, many places began to break off into small states that ruled independently, and while they acknowledged the caliph, they did not give taxes to the caliph. This led to the caliphate having financial problems as well as political problems. All of these reasons had a huge part in the decline of the Abbasids, but the main reason as to why the Abbasid Empire ended happened in 1258 CE. During the reign of al-Mustasim, the Mongols sacked Baghdad and took over the empire. They were led by Hulagu Khan. They destroyed everything in their path, and they also destroyed the city and the many libraries it had. Al-Mustasim was the last reigning caliph of the Abbasid Empire. The Abbasid Empire died as al-Mustasim was executed by the Mongols. This sacking was the fall of Baghdad and a dynasty. The fall of the Abbasid Empire was a huge strike for the political period. It is a huge thing to end a dynasty, but what the Mongols did is they also ended a way to rule and govern the Middle East. They ended the vast caliphates and dynasties who united millions and millions of miles. By ending the Abbasid Caliphate, the Mongols ended a way of living in peace in the Middle East at the time. Middle East today. As you may know, the Middle East of today is full of political and religious conflicts. It is a divided place where chaos reigns over all, and nothing is there to unite. However, what would the Middle East be like today if the Abbasid Empire never fell? It is believed that the fall of the Abbasid Empire could have caused the political and religious trouble of today. This is because, with the end of the Abbasids, was also the end of organization in the Middle East. Under these dynasties, while the people may have been unhappy, they were still united under one ruler, and they could all live together with religion. Another reason why the Mongol desecration of the Abbasid Empire has affected us greatly today is in ISIS. ISIS is a terrorist organization that is taking over the Middle East and conquering everything in its way, much like the Mongols. However, unlike the Mongols, they want to restore power to a caliphate. Their goal is to recreate the Abbasid Empire and create another caliphate dynasty. But they are doing it in a terrible way that is destroying lives and architecture and cities and countries. What they are doing is truly awful. And perhaps, if the Abbasid Empire never fell as it did, ISIS would not have the radical views they have today that is destroying the Middle East. In conclusion, while the Abbasids were also one of the greatest dynasties in the Middle East history and the history of the world, they had many troubles that eventually led to their downfall. Their caliphs were complacent. The caliph eventually became a religious figurehead. There was a huge divide between the people and the caliphate. The Turks came and took over. Their empire crumbled and began to split up, and it all ended when the Mongols destroyed Baghdad and the Abbasid dynasty.